So Dean Phillips, as you all know, is a centrist Democrat in the House, and he's running to be the Democratic nominee for president of the United States. That means he's taking on the incumbent Joe Biden. He's also running against Marianne Williamson, the progressive challenger, and Cenk Uygur, who's currently fighting to be on the ballot. It's yet to be seen whether, I think he got accepted in Arkansas on the ballot, but I think there are other states that have maybe rejected him. I think I saw Nevada did that. I'm not 100% sure on the details, but I know that Cenk is going to end up in court to try to get on the ballot, to try to, give it a crack to become the Democratic nominee. So in the race right now, if you include Cenk, you have Cenk, Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, and of course, Joe Biden. Now, Joe Biden and the Democrats are acting like there isn't a race. I don't know what you're talking about. There's going to be no debate. There's going to be no conversation. We don't want the media to talk about our opponents in any way, shape, or form. And look, keep it real. Team Biden has largely got what they wanted. Marianne Williamson, early on in her campaign, was invited on some shows, some of the time. But by and large, she's been blackballed. She's been blackballed from giving speeches to college Democrats. She's been blackballed from Democratic mailing lists. She's been blackballed from major media organizations. And they've actively had to bend over backwards to make an effort to try to kick out anybody challenging Biden. And by the way, shame on the media. That's like collusion with the Democratic Party. They should support a fair, objective, neutral, reasonable process, but they don't. They just don't do it. Well, Dean Phillips is still in the honeymoon phase of his presidential run, so that means he's actually getting on some of these news outlets. This, I guess, is before the phone call was made from Team Biden and the DNC, where they say, hey, X-nay on having on the Dean Phillips gay. No more allowed on that one. But he goes on to CNN here, and God, man, this drives me crazy. How are you going to find a way? How are you going to find a way to be worse than Biden on one of his worst issues? Namely, what's happening in Gaza? Well, Dean Phillips does exactly that. So let's watch and we'll break it down as we go.
This deal that we've been discussing, reporting is that Hamas would release kidnapped Israeli hostages in exchange for a 3-to-1 ratio of Palestinian prisoners, women and minors, children who are in Israeli prison.
By the way, you might be asking, why is there a 3-to-1 ratio there? Well, it's very simple. There are thousands of Palestinian political prisoners in Israeli jail. And there's only, 200 or so hostages, Israeli hostages, in Hamas custody. So there's a great imbalance in terms of the numbers, so that's why there should be a higher number of Palestinians released for every Israeli. Let's continue.
If you were president of the United States, would you accept that deal?
No, because we have...
Hey, this one, tiny, itty-bitty little bright spot in this sea of genocidal carnage? Are you in favor of that? No, I'm against the one tiny bright spot in the sea of genocidal carnage. Thank you very much. I would like more genocidal carnage. Oh my God, Dean, that's the most embarrassing thing I've ever heard in my life. You're running for president as an outsider against Biden and the establishment, and you're like, I would be more establishment than Joe Biden on this issue. I want no hostage deal at all. God, that's so stupid. Oh my God, that's so stupid. Oh my God.
Prisoners, women and minors, children who are in Israeli prison. If you were president of the United States, would you accept that deal?
No, because we have 9 Americans held hostage right now by Hamas, have been there for 6 weeks, including at least 1 child. And by now, I would have expected American special forces to perhaps play a hand in extracting them. I think it's absurd, shocking, and dismaying that 6 weeks later, we still have American hostages held by a terror organization in Gaza.
Dean, this is the way to get them out. You begin the negotiation. You begin the diplomacy. We don't live in a fucking Chuck Norris movie or a Steven Seagal movie where you could just make a phone call and all of a sudden SEAL Team 6 is bringing out an American 4-year-old. By the way, there was at least one American hostage who was released. I think it was the 4-year-old. But this is the process to get them out. Not some bullshit, fake action-adventure Liam Neeson garbage that you just made up in your own mind, which wouldn't happen in reality. You need the conversation. You need the negotiation. You need the diplomacy. You got to make trades and tit for tat. This is how it works. I have to explain to a congressman how the real world works? Jesus Christ.
I'm happy for the Israelis, don't get me wrong. Hamas should release all hostages. But the fact that we have Americans sitting in Gaza right now held hostage is appalling and should be addressed immediately.
So to be clear, you would turn down even this opportunity to free 50 hostages. And I want to just clarify for the audience, these are Israelis, but some of them are dual citizens. They hold dual passports, including some Americans.
If all Americans are included that are held hostage right now, of course I would approve it. If there's a single American that is still held hostage after this deal, no. I think it's that important, Abby. I think the American president has an obligation to extract Americans. It's been 6 weeks. And I'm happy that some are being released, but every single American citizen should be part of that group. And if I were the American president, I would not agree to anything until every single one of them is released. I would demand it. And if it wasn't...
The way that this deal is working is it's happening in blocks. There's like different groups that are being released one after the other. And like, for you to say, let's not do this, you're saying let's shut off any sort of process here. But, like, this is the way you're likely to get them out. By the way, Dean Phillips, early on, he had a very Weasley position on this. He was like, yes, I'm in favor of a ceasefire as soon as all of the hostages are released. What? I'm going to give you this condition that will never be agreed to, and then I'll do a ceasefire. So then you're not actually in favor of a ceasefire. You're not... And by the way, again, the reason why a ceasefire was an absolute moral necessity is because Israel wasn't killing Hamas. They're killing massive numbers of innocent Palestinian civilians, over 90% of the dead. 18,000 innocent civilians, including 8,000 children. That's why people were screaming ceasefire. It wasn't like, we need a ceasefire because we want to protect Hamas. Yay, Hamas. That's not what people were saying. People were saying, for the love of God, stop killing innocent civilians and children and bombing apartment buildings and hospitals and marketplaces and mosques and churches and UN schools and Jesus Christ. But his position was, I will agree to a ceasefire, but first you need to meet this condition that you're never going to meet. So in other words, you're not in favor of a ceasefire. Jesus Christ.
We have to use every lever available to us to ensure it.
You have said that the war has taken an unacceptable toll on Palestinian citizens and civilians.
And Israelis.
And of course, on Israelis, but in terms of the toll on Palestinians in Gaza, you're saying a ceasefire only in exchange for the hostages. It seems pretty clear at this point. Those are not terms that Hamas will accept.
Great question. Rarely do you see me give so much credit to a CNN host, but she's freaking it here.
So how will you get them to agree to release all of the hostages, which they've refused to do up until this point, simply by putting a ceasefire on the table?
First of all, Hamas should have been eliminated years ago.
Dean, how is that possible? Wakey, wakey, back to the real world. What does that mean? What does that mean? This is like when people, back during the war on terror days, at the beginning of it, we're going to wage a war on terror. We're going to wage a war on terror. We're going to defeat terror. Terror will surrender. And it's like, that was literally just an excuse for an open-ended war and military campaign. Because you're never going to be able to say, we have defeated terrorism. Newsflash, terrorism has now been defeated. They have surrendered. That's not a thing. You're waging war on a tactic. You can't defeat the tactic. Now, by the same token, are you ever going to defeat Hamas? No. Hamas, yes, it's a particular group, but it's also a stand-in for Palestinian hardliners who are sick of the shit and they're willing to violently resist. Are you ever going to eliminate that? Of course. In fact, in this bombing campaign, you probably tripled Hamas numbers because now, what was the number we had it the other day? It's like 10,000 new orphans as a result of the bombing campaign. So you think, oh, we took out some Hamas. Well, you just created 3 times as many, you doofus. But look, maybe that's the point. And Israel knows that, but Dean Phillips doesn't know that. Oh, we should have eradicated Hamas. We should have put an end to bad things. Bad things should have been banned. I'm going to ban bad things. God, it's just, he might be too dumb to realize it, but this is a justification for an open-ended bombing campaign. And in this case, it's killing over 90% civilians.
The fact that a terror organization will not release 200 humans in exchange for the preservation of life of the people they ostensibly represent is appalling.
Okay, well, the fact that a terror organization, namely the IDF, won't release the thousands, I think the low number I saw was 6,000 Palestinian political prisoners rotting away in Israeli prisons, well, that's appalling to me. So we can say it right back in the same direction. Guess what? That's what the negotiations are for. Hey, release the Palestinian political prisoners. We'll release the Israeli hostages. That's the whole point of the negotiations. No! I will not! You'll do everything I want, and then we'll talk.
What would you do if you were president? What would you do to change that?
Just like I proposed. Release the 200 hostages. There will be an immediate...
Hamas has to do that. So how do you get Hamas to do it?
Hamas has to do it because... How do you get Hamas to do it?
Yeah.
This is exactly the presentation. Release 200 hostages, an immediate ceasefire, a multinational security force to maintain security for all Palestinians in Gaza that eliminates Israel's responsibility.
Do you think that the Biden administration is deferring too much to the Israeli government in how this war is conducted? Because it kind of sounds like what you're saying is that you think that the United States government should simply just go in there and release the Americans.
I look at outcomes and facts. And the fact of the matter is, this cycle has been going on for the 50 years that Joe Biden has been in Washington. And by the way, the fact that Hamas is holding these hostages right now should have been addressed, I believe, years ago. And to answer your question directly, yes, I think there's been too much deference to Netanyahu's right-wing government for too long. He is a big problem for the safety and security of Israel. And I hope Israelis make a change soon.
Yeah, but you won't tell them to stop the bombing. You won't tell them to stop the bombing. You won't tell them to end the occupation and end the apartheid. You won't force anybody into negotiations to bring about some sort of diplomatic solution, like a two-state solution or a one-state solution, or it's democratic equal rights for all. You won't do any of that. In fact, you would say, I'm not taking this deal. So that's how you would get involved? That's how you would pressure Netanyahu? No, they needed to pressure Netanyahu to have any conversations at all. And Dean Phillips is basically saying his position is the opposite, that if anything, I would have tried to force them to not take this deal. The one tiny little bright spot in the sea of genocidal carnage. And this is how he's differentiating himself from Biden. I would be more pro-status quo than him. Jesus Christ. Well, he's been about 98% pro-status quo, so I would make you, what, 100% status quo? I'll pass. All right, guys, that's the show. I love you all very much. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. Please click like. Click that bell icon so you get a notification every single time a video drops. You can always support the channel on Patreon. Links below. A lot of these segments that we do on Israel in particular get demonetized, so we could use the help. $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever you can afford would really go a long way. And you could tip on YouTube as well with the thanks button. And you could sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. That link is below as well. All right, guys, I love you all, and I will be back here tomorrow to talk some more. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.